LegalizeFreedom.com. Why are we here? Where do we come from? Where are we going? From the nature of reality to the future of humanity. Beyond politics, poverty and war. LegalizeFreedom.com.
Greetings and welcome once again to LegalizeFreedom.com. I'm your host Greg Moffat, and my guest today is Dominic Frisby, who joins us to discuss his book, Bitcoin, The Future of Money. In 2008, while the world was busy panicking about the global financial crisis, a computer programmer called Satoshi Nakamoto posted a message on an obscure mailing list. "I've been working on a new electronic cash system," he said. "It might make sense to get some just in case it catches on." Nobody seemed to care. But what he had created would become the world's most famous alternative currency, Bitcoin. Economists, anarchists, speculators, computer coders, libertarians, entrepreneurs, and criminals worldwide were inspired. Early adopters would make a return 2 million times larger than their initial investment. Now it seems that Bitcoin will do to banking and finance what email did to the postal service and what the internet did to publishing. Destroy old monopolies and create opportunities for the masses. Some even suggest that the technology behind Bitcoin will usurp our Western system of representative democracy. In Bitcoin, The Future of Money, Dominic Frisby sets out to solve the mystery surrounding the identity of Bitcoin's secretive creator, explain in layman's terms exactly how the system works, and show how Bitcoin will change the world forever. Hello and welcome, Dominic, and thank you so much for joining us again on LegalizeFreedom.com.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on.
Today, Dominic, we're going to talk about your latest book, Bitcoin, The Future of Money. Before we dive into that, just tell folks a little bit about your background, your work, and why you've got an interest in this area.
Well, I've got a slightly unusual background. On the one hand, I'm a comedian, and on the other hand, I'm a financial writer. But my first book was called Life After the State, and it was basically I suppose you'd call it an anarchist or a libertarian manifesto arguing for a much smaller government. And the main kind of theme of the book, if you like, was that government and finance have both only been able to grow to the size which they have because of the money system under which we operate. And if we are to reduce the size that both these two occupy in our economy, then the way to do that is to use alternative systems of money, to find some kind of independent money. I've always been a big gold bug in that regard. I'm a bit more cynical about it now, probably because of what's been going on with the gold price. But so the next kind of logical book to write was about this new thing called Bitcoin, this new money for the internet.
Oh, don't talk to me about precious metals. Silver has my heart broken, and I've still got a mountain of this stuff, and it seems to be going down in value by the day.
Well, it's just horrible, yeah.
Now, Bitcoin's been talked about a great deal in recent times, but for those who have no idea, just give us a brief, boil down of what it is, how it emerged, and what it basically does.
Well, it is a new form of money. Basically, it's not a money that's issued by governments or banks. It's a money that is created through computer processing. And it was first in 2008, when the world was panicking about the global financial crisis. A computer programmer who went by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto posted a message on an out-of-the-way mailing list. And he said, "I've been working on a new electronic cash system. It might make sense to get some just in case it catches on." And nobody paid any notice. It was 3 days before anyone even replied. But what he programmed was this thing called Bitcoin. And it would just capture the imagination of I don't even know what the collective noun for a group of devotees is, but we'll call it a cult. It attracted a cult of devotees ranging from economists and anarchists and speculators and computer programmers and libertarians, criminals, entrepreneurs, all sorts of different people were captivated by this incredible new money. Now, what is interesting about that kind of group of people is I think you only really need to pay attention to two, like, what economists say or what libertarians say. It doesn't really matter. The two people that you need to pay attention there are computer coders and criminals. Now, often black markets are the first to embrace a new tech and make it work on a practical day-to-day basis. They don't have the luxury of huge venture capital investment and are able to operate for years on end without actually turning a profit. They need to make things work straight away. And already, and for several years now, the black markets have been using Bitcoin as a form of money. And the fact that they have, I'm not endorsing black markets. I'm not saying we should all go and spend money on the black markets or anything like that. But the fact that they have is very telling about the practical potential of this thing. The other, and by the way, black markets, for example, were the first people to make the internet, turn the internet to profit. They were the first kind of sector, if you like, to be profitable on the internet. The other group of people that you need to pay attention to there is computer coders, computer programmers, because they have completely fallen in love with this thing, or not necessarily Bitcoin itself, but the tech behind it. Now, let me just explain very quickly what it's a watershed tech. It's a breakthrough tech. And let me very quickly explain what the breakthrough is. I've got all sorts of different forms of money in various accounts online, none of which exist in physical form. I've got some US dollars, I've got some pounds, I've got some euros, I've got some supermarket rewards points, I've got some air miles. These are all different forms of money in the sense that they are tokens that have some kind of value that at some later stage can be exchanged for a good or a service. Obviously, the US dollars are far more widely accepted than the air miles. So they're a more effective form of money, but they're all forms of money nonetheless. And none of those forms of money exist in the real world, not even the US dollars. Only about 3% of US dollars or pounds actually exist in physical form. The rest are all digital. But if I want to spend any of those forms of money, I have to go through a middleman of some kind. If I want to spend the dollars, I've got to go through a bank or a credit card company or PayPal, which actually involves going through two different middlemen. If I want to redeem the air miles, I've got to go through the credit card company. If I want to redeem the supermarket rewards points, I've got to go through the supermarket, and so on. Now, if I'm standing next to you, I can hand you a pound note, and that is a cash transaction. There is no middleman. And Bitcoin is just another form of digital money. But what separates it from the other forms of digital money is that it is digital cash. In other words, it involves no middleman. The transaction is between me and you, and the bank or the supermarket or the air miles, credit cards, whoever it is, they have nothing to do with it. Now, if I send you an email, you can copy and paste that email and send it to 10, 20, a million different people if you like. You can do the same if I send you a photo. You can do the same if I send you a video. You can do that with any form of digital code. Now, all Bitcoin is basically is a form of digital code. And the problem, now, this goal of digital cash, this was something that computer programmers and in particular a specific group of computer programmers known as the cypherpunks who emerged in the early 1990s. This is something that people had been working on for years. How do we replicate a cash transaction digitally without involving some kind of middleman? And because of this thing of being able, like I said, if I send you an email, you can cut and paste it and send it to a million people. If you can do that with money, it's completely useless. And this was known as the problem of double spending. And for years, people have been trying to solve this problem of double spending, and nobody could do it. And then suddenly along came this chap, Satoshi Nakamoto, with this thing called Bitcoin. And he said, I've solved the problem of double spending. And nobody believed him at first. And the thing has grown and grown and grown. And lo and behold, he has solved this problem of double spending thanks to this amazing new bit of tech called the blockchain. Now, I'm not going to attempt to begin and explain how the blockchain works. Everyone wants to know how it works, but I'm not going to do that. I do explain it in my book, but it's quite a lengthy explanation. I think I explain it quite simply in my book and put it in language that people can understand. And you don't actually need to understand it in order to use Bitcoin, just as you don't need to know how the internet works in order to use the internet. Or in fact, you don't even need to know how pounds and dollars work in order to use pounds and dollars. But the fact is, it works. And the fact that the Bitcoin is being used by, among other people, as I said, black markets, shows that this tech works. Now, what is happening now? And by the way, today, I have to send, I want to make an investment in a company in Canada. But the investment is in US dollars. And today I had to go into HSBC in order to send a sum of dollars to this bank in Canada. And that involves, because it's US dollars and I'm sending US dollars from England to Canada, that involves going through an intermediary bank in the United States. And I wasn't able to do this through HSBC's website. So I ended up having to go into the bank. I waited 10 minutes to see someone. I finally got to see someone. The whole process took 40 minutes. And at the end of the process, we had to agree the exchange rate. And the exchange rate at the moment between the pound and the US dollar is, and there was a £30 fee to send this money. And the exchange rate between the pound and the dollar is $1.59.5 to a pound. And HSBC were transferring my money for $1.55. So they took 4.5 cents. That's like 3%. Just for doing nothing, just for transferring my money to US dollars. The whole process took me 45 minutes. I got so cross by the end of it, I walked out of the bank and didn't send the money. That whole time was completely wasted. If I'd done it with Bitcoin, the whole process would have taken me about 2 seconds and cost me absolutely nothing. And, you know, that is one of the reasons why Bitcoin or some replication derivative of Bitcoin is going to replace government currency as we know it. It is an international currency. We need an international currency on the internet where we cross borders 1 million times every day. And government currencies are for a different age and a different technology. And yeah, that's my little rant against HSBC over with. So let's come back to this question, Greg, of digital cash. And what Bitcoin has successfully done is, with this blockchain technology, it has cut out the middleman. The computer coders call this process of cutting out middlemen disintermediation. And it has disintermediated governments and banks from the creation of and the processing of money and payments. And now computer coders are looking at that and they're going, right, we've disintermediated government banks from the creation of money. What else can we disintermediate? So that we have a thing. And there's all sorts of ideas being banded around and all sorts of code is being developed. And already what is starting to happen is we have a thing called BitMessage. So I can send an email directly to you without having to go through the middleman that is Google or Yahoo or whoever the email account is with. We have Twister, which is like Twitter, but without a central body organizing it. So you can post tweets quite safely. You could organize an Arab Spring or indulge in too much free speech, whatever it is you want to do, without fear of being censored by Twitter. You can have social networking like Facebook on a blockchain. By the way, this has all sorts of implications for privacy as well. A lot of people are very concerned about Google knowing everything about us. Well, blockchain tech is going to protect people's privacy in a way that hitherto it hasn't been protected. You can have all sorts of financial assets can be traded on a blockchain. Companies are starting to issue stock over a blockchain. The need for brokers and stock markets is diminishing. Legal contracts can actually be automated over a blockchain. That also has all sorts of, there's a thing called smart contracts being developed that has all sorts of implications for the legal industry. You could actually run the health service much more efficiently or education much more efficiently over a blockchain and cut out all the middlemen involved there. And in fact, we operate under a system called representative democracy, where we represent an MP or a congressman to represent the local interests in Parliament. But with blockchain tech, the technology is now there for people to vote on issues as they're debated in Parliament. So there is no longer a need for a local representative in Parliament. That is a system born out of a different age. So we can move from a system of representative democracy to a system of liquid democracy, which is a far truer form of democracy, also a far more scary form of democracy. But if you believe in democracy, then the people should have their say, and MPs should merely be administrators of the people's will. So this process of disintermediation, which has been made possible by this breakthrough tech, which is the blockchain behind Bitcoin, is incredibly exciting. And just as email put paid to the post office the internet put paid to publishing and music and transformed those industries and destroyed the old monopolies, all sorts of new monopolies came along. Google, YouTube, Facebook, all these new monopolies. And this new tech that is the blockchain is going to not only do the same as email did to the post office to finance and banking, but it is also going to have almost transformed the way that the whole internet works. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take many years, but it is incredibly exciting and transformative. Over to you, Greg. I've ranted at you, but over to you.
That's why I got you on here. As far as HSBC are concerned, the last time I had an altercation in there, I thought I'd remind the counter staff about the LIBOR fixing and the laundering of the drug money, but it turns out the counter staff didn't know about those things, but now they do.
There's a surprise.
Now, at the nub of this, as you say, is money without banks or government. And that's a powerful thing, because a lot of people still think that even in the wake of the banking shenanigans of the last few years, that somehow banks are, immutable and eternal. But that form of banking certainly has been going on, as we would recognize it today, for centuries. But a lot of people don't appreciate just how awesome the power to create money is. And even today, there are politicians and even bankers who are not fully aware of how the process works. So if this is to change in any significant way, as you say, we're looking at a world-changing event, possibly bigger even than the internet itself.
That is the potential. I mean, it's potentially bigger than the internet, not just because it affects money, but because it has the potential to change the way the whole internet works. By the way, I was a massive gold and silver bug, and I've grown extremely cynical after what has happened. And I think Bitcoin would do, and I think at the moment we're in a bull market for tech stocks and we're in a bear market for alternative monies, if you like. Bitcoin's in a bear market, gold and silver are both in bear markets. I think if Bitcoin wants to do really well, it needs to kind of almost rebrand itself as a tech stock and get people excited about the new tech, rather than rebrand it as this kind of libertarian alternative to government, because it's the tech and the savings that people can make as a result of the tech and the disruptive nature of the tech that is going to make businesses start using it on a day-to-day basis. It is not the kind of ideological libertarian stuff. And once businesses start using it, then all the stuff that the libertarians have dreamed of can actually start happening. But for the moment, I'd like to see Bitcoin, rebranding itself as a tech stock.
What you point out in the book, really, or one of your interviewees perhaps points out that it's functioning a bit like a tech stock in the sense that it's dominated in terms of ownership by early adopters. It'd be a bit like if you bought half of Microsoft in the 70s and we're still holding it today.
Yeah, I think it's to the credit, by the way, of the early adopters. Many of the early adopters have not sold theirs. It appears that Satoshi Nakamoto himself has not sold his Bitcoins, and that is to his immense credit. And it shows the huge integrity of the man. He has made such colossal amounts of money. He's estimated to be worth somewhere between $300 million and $500 million. And, surely if you'd earned that kind of money, you would be tempted to at least buy yourself a new watch or a new car or something like that. And he appears to have sold none of his Bitcoins. And it shows immense integrity, but it also suggests that he has an income of some kind from elsewhere. And by the way, as you know, I have a huge chapter in the book about Satoshi and who he might be. And I think I have come up with the right answer to that question. And I got kind of obsessed with it. And now I've got to the bottom of it, or I think I've got to the bottom of it. I kind of regret it, but I couldn't not put it in the book after I'd done all that research.
Yeah, that's one of the
when I say I regret it, because of his privacy. That's what he clearly wants.
Yes, yeah, I mean, that's one of the most interesting wrinkles in all of this, isn't it? The identity of this guy, because it's like the idea that that's perhaps his real name seems to be, it doesn't hold much water. And obviously we're not going to spoil it for people here. They can get your book, but it's fascinating. And you can see why this guy would want to, or girl, would want to remain anonymous.
I can tell you with almost total surety that he is a bloke. All this libertarian gold bug investing stuff, it is for some reason, it is mainly a bloke's thing. It is not a woman's thing. And also the world of computer programmers is a world that is largely dominated by blokes. And, for whatever reason, certain professions attract certain sexes, and both libertarian gold buggery, if that's the right word, and computer programming are both very male preserves. But that's besides the point. The guy was a bloke because I'm pretty sure I've nailed who he is.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because the received wisdom is that no one can disappear in the modern world, that, you just can't evade detection because of all the global surveillance and tracking and all the rest of it. But
some people have even suggested, by the way, the guy who I suggest who he is, some people have even suggested that he doesn't exist, that he is a pseudonym for something else.
Like a group of people or something like that?
No, like imagine if I'm Dominic Frisby and I go online and I create this amazing thing on the internet under the name of Gary Smith, and loads of people are going, who's Gary Smith? Gary Smith. And they conclude that Gary Smith is in fact Dominic Frisby. And then it turns out that Dominic Frisby doesn't exist either. Dominic Frisby is in fact, John Gold.
Yes.
I don't think that's true in this case, but some people have suggested it.
Yeah. Well, of course, I mean, it's open to all sorts of speculation, isn't it? Some of it wilder than others. To what extent is Bitcoin open to any sort of manipulation in price in the way that other currencies are and the markets in general?
Well, there's no doubt that with the run it had up to $1,240 at the end of last year, that it was a bubble. It got into bubble territory, and people were way overexcited about it, and its value. I'm not saying it can't go higher than $1,240, but at that time, its value relative to the amount it was being used on a day-to-day basis was excessive. It appears to be being manipulated because, it is potentially manipulated because something like 50 people are believed to control more than 50% of Bitcoins. So that is a very small number of people controlling a large chunk. And so from that, if they kind of got together and formed some kind of cartel, I'm sure they could manipulate the price in all sorts of ways. And also the issue of Bitcoin mining, the process by which Bitcoins are created, now seems to be, whereas lots of people were doing it at one stage, it now seems to be the preserve of just a few people and or just a few companies. And in fact, at one stage, one company was believed to control more than 50% of Bitcoin mining. So that is very monopolistic. And there's a professor called Kevin Dowd from the University of Durham, who in fact wrote a very nice thing about my book. He said it was outstanding, but he's saying that he thinks Bitcoin is doomed because of the fact that the mining, the creation, is controlled by too few people. We'll wait and see what happens.
Well, there's two things here, really, isn't there? There's Bitcoin itself, and then there's cryptocurrencies as a wider arena. So perhaps, again, this is a point you make in the book, perhaps in future Bitcoin won't be around, but whether that spells a death knell for all cryptocurrencies seems unlikely. I think you mentioned the idea that Sony Walkman and the Amstrad home computer, today we don't use those things, but we still have music on the move and we have computers at home. So maybe Bitcoin will just be seen, it'll be tossed into the dustbin of history, but it'll be seen as a pioneering technology.
Yeah, that's possible, and that's an idea that does the rounds a little bit, and it's something I suggest in the book, and I'm not the first person to suggest it. It might be that Bitcoin has to fail so that others can succeed, And, as a stock market investor, as a speculator, I look at the Bitcoin chart and all I see is bear market, and the trend is down. And there's no knowing when that trend will end. Will it end here? Will it end at $200, $100? Will it go back to $50? Bitcoin has a habit of going right back to the breakout point. And from memory, the breakout point began in early 2013, somewhere below $30. So, there's no telling how low it could go. So I would describe myself as more bullish about the tech than I am about Bitcoin itself at this stage. But at the moment, it's all about Bitcoin, like something like 95%. I mean, although there are 500 altcoins, something about like 95% of the cryptocurrency market cap is Bitcoin.
Now, instinctively, I'm in favor of this because, for anti-government and decentralizing reasons. It's interesting when I've read some criticism of Bitcoin, the haters use strange language to pick holes in, not just in Bitcoin, but the whole idea of decentralized cryptocurrencies. And it's as if the mainline banking system is safe and secure and honest and upstanding and free from risk and is never used for nefarious purposes. All of the criticisms that you can apply of that sort of nature to Bitcoin, it's already happening with mainline banking.
Yes, absolutely. I hate mainline banking. I hope it rots. I've been so ripped off by them over the last couple of years. I just have absolutely no sympathy, and I hope it goes the way of I don't know, something that's gone down the tubes, the way of Newsweek or something. In fact, let me just go on a side tack of what traditional banking has done to people. And I'm going to use an analogy here. And I'm going to tell you a story about the telephone. Now, at the kind of peak of the tech, which came at about in 2008, there was 1.3 billion landlines worldwide. Now, people love to communicate. Telecoms companies love to profit from people communicating. They'll lay cables anywhere in the world if they think they can make money out of it. So with some 7 billion people on the planet, the vast majority of whom one assumes aren't hermits and like communicating, you might have thought that 1.3 billion figure would be higher. But it wasn't. And then along comes the mobile phone, and the point is proved. There are now 6.3 billion cell phone users in a global population of 7 billion people. More people have a mobile phone than have a toilet, according to a recent UN study.
I have to say, I'd rather have the latter if it came down to it.
Given the choice, but they don't have the choice. Now, of course, the superior technology of the cell phone is such that broader coverage is considerably cheaper to achieve than it is with the landline. But there's something else that enabled the cell phone to succeed where the landline failed, and it's called financial inclusion. And basically, poor people couldn't get access to the basic financial services they needed to get a landline. Landlines, except for payphones, were credit-based. You needed a bank account. Now, many people might have liked a landline, but they couldn't get one because the financial system actually prevented them because they didn't have a bank account. And the telecoms companies concluded that the demand wasn't there. They didn't put in the infrastructure, and that was the end of it. But with the cell phone, you don't need a bank account. You can buy the credit you need with cash. There aren't the same barriers to entry. Anyone can get one, and they have. 6.3 billion people have. Now, it's estimated, I still, every time I look at these numbers, I just go, blimey. The World Bank estimate that half of all adults worldwide don't have access to basic financial services in 2014. And only 2 billion people are banked and participate in e-commerce. Yet, there are about 5.5 billion people have at least some access to the internet. So you're talking about a potential 3.5 billion people who could participate in e-commerce, but don't because they don't have access to the necessary financial infrastructure. But thanks to Bitcoin, so they could offer their services in the net, but they don't have a bank account to receive the money in. But thanks to Bitcoin and other forms of mobile money, this lack of basic financial services, it's just not a barrier to entry anymore. You don't need a bank account. I think current accounts are going to be history. And all you need to participate in e-commerce is some kind of internet access. And most of the world's population are going to have that. long before they have proper sanitation or education or healthcare or whatever it is. And suddenly the developed world is going to have 3.5 billion new people, half the world's population, to outsource jobs to sell products to receive products from. That's a colossal amount of new trade. I mean, mind-blowing, kind of, it's revolutionary kind of potential amounts of new trade. And the money that the unbanked 3.5 billion make might enable them to buy the sanitation, the education, the healthcare that they've been so deprived of. And it's a bit like the Industrial Revolution, enabling workers to escape rural poverty, and within a generation becoming part of a new emerging educated middle class. And I don't know what we call it. I call it the financial revolution, the great financial revolution. But you can see from what I've just described there how modern banking actually stopped people communicating. So the sooner that this restrictive system can be disrupted and replaced by something else, the better. And it's already starting to happen in Africa. You've got the M-Pesa, the mobile money that they use in Kenya. M stands for mobile and Pesa Swahili for money. And that was when people began sending their airtime, their mobile phone minutes, to friends and family. And of course, airtime has a definite value. It's based on a real thing. So it's a bit like a kind of modern day commodity currency. And you could send airtime by SMS. And gradually, Vodafone and Safaricom, who are the two biggest telecoms companies in Kenya, started to regulate and facilitate the practice. And now, something like 2/3 of Kenyans now use the M-Pesa, this mobile money. 43% of national GDP flows through it, and 75% of the country's financial transactions are handled by the system. Yet only 40% of Kenyans have a bank account. And you can use the M-Pesa to make payments, deposit money, withdraw money, transfer money. And now financial inclusion is 80% in Kenya, but without mobile money, it drops to 23%. So you can see what mobile money is doing for financial inclusion. And Kenya is booming relative to its neighbours. Its economy grew by 6% last year. It's now the fourth biggest in sub-Saharan Africa, and it's considered by economists as a middle-income country rather than a low-income one. And Nairobi is like the kind of the Bangalore or the Silicon Valley of Africa. And the M-Pesa is a national currency. With an international currency like Bitcoin, the possibility is just enormous. So it's all incredibly exciting.
Now, trying to live by sidestepping the mainline banking system is one thing. If you try and bypass government in your life or cut it out altogether, it's not long before they come knocking. So in terms of the official response to this, seeing it as potentially a dangerous development threatening their survival, banks and governments in the medium to long term future, they've got to walk a bit of a fine line, because I'm always very vigilant in looking for stories about people trying to control the internet, what happens on there. Yeah. But it is a very fine line, because the internet is absolutely essential now to the global economy, more or less in different places. But so internet regulation is difficult, because can you imagine what would happen tomorrow if there's just suddenly no internet? I mean, the mayhem there would be. So in that sense, if Bitcoin is truly dispersed, it's going to be almost impossible to try and control. But of course, maybe some kind of arbitrary draconian laws could be introduced banning it or something. But how else could they actually get a lid on this?
Well, it's very hard. It's certainly very hard to control, and it's very hard to shut down. But they can make Bitcoin use illegal. They've already done that in Russia and in Chad, that country in Central Africa. Various other countries, I think it's been banned. But they banned drugs. People still use drugs. The problem with banning something is you just drive it underground. And other countries have taken a much more liberal attitude towards it. The UK, the US, the jury's still out as to what kind of regulation there's going to be in the US. But for sure, the countries that take the most liberal approach to it will be the countries that see the most economic benefits from it in terms of increased trade. Putin apparently hates it. and but that doesn't stop Russians necessarily from using it. So yeah, I mean, it'll be, I suppose, hard for governments to shut it down, but they can't shut it down altogether. But it would be much more favourable if they took a much more liberal approach, put it that way.
Well, you had the tale of Silk Road, which you talk about in your book, which was the website basically you could get. I've never looked at it or never attempted to, but drugs and perhaps other illegal things as well. What's sort of difference? Because that was taken down. What's the essential difference between that, say, and the Bitcoin system?
Well, you're talking about a website, where a black market website that existed on the Tor network, which is a network which you can operate on without being traced. And the people that operate Tor are in fact, and by the way, Bitcoin is not as anonymous as people think it is. It's actually more transparent than you can trace every payment. And if you know the person's wallet address, well, then you know who's made the payment. I mean, it's possible to hide the payments that you make if you're a bit cute, but it's the idea that it's completely anonymous is wrong. But the Tor network is anonymous. And apparently there are reports that the Tor browser is being downloaded a great deal in countries where there is a great deal of, or a great lack of internet freedom, because what you do on the internet cannot be traced. The Tor scrambles what you've been up to. So that's quite interesting. What's interesting about the Silk Road, the black market, is that the FBI spent 18 months trying to close it down. And eventually they made their great bust, and there was a huge fanfare, and they got their man, the Dread Pirate Roberts, a guy called Ross Ulbricht, they believe. And within 2 weeks, there were 20 different black market sites. 20.
It's whack-a-mole, isn't it? It's whack-a-mole.
Yeah, within 20. And so how the FBI are going to hope to stop them all? And there's already Silk Road 2.0. And, I look at it and I'm very interested in it. And the site works extremely well. And, a load of money got stolen from the Silk Road 2.0. But the organisers increased their commission and for a short period, and then managed to pay back everybody who had money stolen. So, it works really well. But, buyers and sellers have a happy relationship. And I've got my kind of personal needs for any of the goods that are offered on the Silk Road are pretty much in the past. I'm 45 years old now, but I have a son who's 14, and I live in the real world. And I know that, when he's 16 or 17 or 18 or at university, he's going to want to smoke weed, and he's going to probably want to do other stuff. I'd much rather he got his stuff on the Silk Road, which is safe, than start walking around some dodgy back street in some, unsalubrious part of town, getting something that he has no idea what it is. And so, but the sheer scale of all these black market websites, I think is going to force, and it's long overdue, a long overdue change in the drug laws. And already the attitude to drugs seems to be changing amongst the political elite. So that's very exciting and positive in my view.
Well, the general wisdom is that if government declares war on something, you're going to get more of it.
Yeah, yeah.
From obesity to drugs, that tends to be how it works, and certainly as far as terrorism is concerned.
Yeah, I think I actually say Bitcoin's going to end the war on drugs.
Yes,
something a line like that, something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly what you say. Did you see the documentary Pirate Bay Away from Keyboard?
Oh no, what's that?
Are you aware of Pirate Bay?
No.
Okay, well, it's basically one of the. It's like Napster, that type of idea.
Okay.
And there were several young Swedish guys who were behind that. The reason I mention it is because they had a completely different way of looking at the world than to guys. I'm 45, two guys of our age. Now, obviously, we might not be typical 45-year-olds, but watching this documentary, I could see how these kids had come up, and they just don't see the world in the same way. It's just like, why is it like that? We're going to do it differently.
Yeah.
Specifically, very different ideas about copyright and intellectual property. But the reason I mention it is because it's an interesting documentary on their journey of being shut down by the authorities. But what that hinged on was that A, the authorities could find who was behind Pirate Bay, physically track these people down, and B, their servers were in one location So the authorities could literally go in and metaphorically take a sledgehammer to these things. That's not the case with Bitcoin. How would you physically intervene to do anything about it? It just can't be done in that way.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the point about the Silk Road. The FBI used a colossal amount of resources to close it down. 18 months, goodness knows how many people working on the job. And within 2 weeks, there are 20 or 25 different sites. There aren't unlimited resources to fight something like this if it grows to a considerable size.
Now, some of the worst excesses in the banking system in recent years have been down to its instability and inherent vulnerability, can be bypassed with a system like Bitcoin. For example, we've seen capital controls being enacted, bail-ins, like Cyprus probably being the one that springs to mind. Bitcoin is a way around this, and in fact, you point out that one of the price spikes could in fact have been Russian money pouring into Bitcoin at around the time of the Cyprus debacle.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the beauties of Bitcoin is that governments can't spend it, or it can't be manipulated in the way that current systems of money are manipulated. I'm not one of these people that thinks the government is always manipulating money, but the money has become a political tool when money should just be a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account. But it's become a political tool, and it's been a political tool on and off throughout history. But it is lovely to have a money that is beyond the intervention of both governments and banks. It's a lovely idea in theory. It's a kind of libertarian dream, and the reality is that it can actually work on the internet in 2014, and it is starting to work. The fact that, like I say, black markets are using it is testament to its efficacy.
Now, referred earlier to your previous book, Life After the State, and of course, Bitcoin could almost be like direct follow-on from that in many ways. It's kind of one of the areas that you talk about in that book, and in fact, I think you used the phrase of Bitcoin basically being the enemy of the state. Yeah. And a couple of areas to me are particularly interesting, is one of which is, what would the potential implications of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies be for the tax system?
Yeah, well, they're potentially huge, because taxes are much easier to control. The easiest form of tax to collect is PAYE, income tax at source, so that labourers pay their tax, companies pay labourers tax directly, and the labourer never actually receives his money. He only actually receives his after-tax income. Other forms of tax are far harder to collect. The taxes of the self-employed, the taxes of cash markets, the tax, corporation tax. These taxes are much harder to collect. And if something like Bitcoin becomes a dominant money system, it's not a kind of and the world starts using it, it's not a money that governments can tax at source in the way that they currently can. The onus is going to be on the person who's earning money in Bitcoin to report his tax honestly. Now, most people will do that, but of course some people won't. But it is a much, and the government's going to have to investigate, the Inland Revenue or IRS or whoever it is going to have to spend money investigating, doing random investigations, checking. It's a much more expensive tax to collect. And the more that people start moving away from government monies to alternate monies, the more that government is going to, if it wants to carry on operating in the way that it currently does, it's not going to, debasing the money through inflation, the inflation tax, income tax, tax is going to be harder to collect. So either governments are going to have to learn to tighten their belts, or we will see some kind of struggle at some stage, assuming that cryptocurrencies grow. If a government doesn't control the money, it is harder for a government to live in the way that it currently does. The state is so big in the early 21st century purely as a result of the fiat money system. And if the money system changes, then the state too will have to change.
There's also the implications of the blockchain technology on the kind of snooping and surveillance culture we have now. That could have, as you mentioned earlier, what else can be decentralized? And people like the NSA might have a much harder time in future, depending on how this technology develops and how it's spread.
Yeah, I mean, that's definite. If I can start sending emails through BitMessage or whatever it is directly to the person that receives the email, and they're not stored on Google servers forever, that is a much more private world. And, there's always the argument that comes in, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you've got nothing to be scared of. But, things get twisted. And I use Google all the time, and God knows how much dirt they've got on me. And if there was and I think Gmail, as it happens, is great. I think it's a really good email provider. But I do every now and then have concerns about my privacy, and in the end, I just go, oh, nobody's going to do anything. But so the idea of a much more private world is an attractive one. And you're absolutely right. The snooping that currently exists will not be possible in a blockchain tech orientated world. You make a very good point. In fact, I might write an article about that.
Please do. Send me the link.
Yeah.
Well, just in closing, Dominic, as the late Michael Rupert used to like to say a lot, until we change the way money works, we change nothing. And after most of a lifetime of what can only be described as despondency, looking at the banking system and the way money does work, this, for the first time, is something that I genuinely feel. And this, can go either way. There's a lot of danger involved here, but this could finally change that game.
It could, and I hadn't heard that quote before, but I rather like it. You're absolutely right, it could, but we must stop focusing on how evil governments and banks are. If this thing is going to work, we have to focus on the technological aspect of Bitcoin. We have to get excited about the savings it's going to make people, the efficacy, the people that it's going to bring into world trade, and all that side of stuff. And that is what will make Bitcoin happen, or whatever Bitcoin is a precursor to.
Okay, then. Finally, Dominic, tell people about the book again, just where they can get it, share your websites, anything else you'd like to put out there. And incidentally, you do have an appendix in the book about how people can get involved with Bitcoin if they wish to.
Yeah, I mean, I say to people, go to blockchain.info and get yourself a wallet. Then go to, if you're in the UK, go to bittylicious.co.uk or go to Coinbase in the States or wherever it is, and deposit £20 or $20. Buy £20 worth of Bitcoin, stick them in your wallet, get a friend to do the same, and practice sending each other small amounts of money. And then find a coffee shop that accepts Bitcoins and go and have a latte paid for in Bitcoins. And then you're kind of participating in the revolution without and learning about this incredible new tech without risking any significant amount of capital. The book is called Bitcoin, The Future of Money, ? The website is bitcointhefutureofmoney.com. You can buy the book there. You can buy the book at Amazon, Waterstones. I don't think you can. I don't have a deal in the United States. If you're in the United States, you want to buy the book, you have to buy it through Amazon. But we're just in the course of getting some kind of American distribution deal. You can still buy it there, buy the Kindle version. And and the audio book, if you want to buy the audio book, that is also available at bitcointhefutureofmoney.com, and then click on audiobook and you can buy the audiobook there. Or you can buy the audiobook on Audible, but if you buy it from me, I make more money.
That's what we want. Okay, excellent. Well, Dominic, thank you so much for joining us again on legalizefreedom.com.
My pleasure, Greg. Thanks very much for inviting me.
Well, folks, that's it for another week. As ever, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, check out the website, which is legalizefreedom.com. That's legalize-freedom.com, where you'll find an archive of programs offering alternative views on a wide range of topics, including politics and economics, energy and environment, culture, spirituality, history, and the nature of reality. You can also browse and buy a range of publications from our guests, and if you're feeling generous, make a donation to help keep the site up and running. Based on current audience numbers, if everyone who tuned in donated just 5 pence per show, that's about 8 cents US, this could become a full-time, fully funded operation, offering more and more often. During October 2014, over 50,000 of you streamed or downloaded at least one show. Total donations were £7 UK, which currently converts to about $11 US. Whether you listen, donate, or do both, I greatly appreciate your support. Until next time, I'm Greg Moffat, and you've been listening to LegalizeFreedom.com.